Gwen, welcome to the Further Forward podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Ashley.
Ah, so happy to have you. And I am so glad that that everything worked out, that we are recording, that we are here, that
My gosh, by the
everything is in our,
grace of the internet gods, here we are.
we will take it. We will take it. So I think I've been thinking about how to start this podcast. And I literally in this moment still have no idea because um I am so lucky and so fortunate to know so many different types of wonderful people. And in the back of my mind, I'm always like, are people listening thinking all she does is call her friends and say, hey, can you be on my podcast? And the answer would be kind of yes. And I just know really incredible people. And so, um, for everyone listening, Gwen and I went to grad school together, and I think I'll just leave it there because it will unfold. But we do know each other. I did not just contact a random author.
We do. We have known each other for over 11 years. And
Yes.
I know this because that's how long I've known my husband. And we met him at the same time,
To say it literally.
at the same moment. And we've woven in and out of each other's lives since then, and certainly not always been in close touch. But I have watched what you've been up to from afar with so much awe and pride. Although, I mean, I have no right to, but I feel this sense of incredible pride and joy at what you've been up to since then, and the incredible way that you show up in the world, which is so much of what this podcast is about, right? Is how you do that, how you intentionally continue to work on the project of doing that. So I'm so glad to be in conversation with you.
Thank you. And same. It's been like really, I felt so special when the article came out before the book in the New York Times, and we'll get into this. People, just let us love on each other for a moment if you're listening. But when the article came out, I was just also filled with pride because any of us who were in that room with you in grad school, we knew this story before the world did. And to kind of have that special moment of just seeing how it evolved over so many years, right? And you lived it. So it's been evolving your whole life. But just for me in those, maybe at that point, 8 or 9 or 10 years by the time that came out, from the play you wrote to that article to then your memoir, was just like, this is exactly what this podcast is about. You are becoming, in front of all of us in different ways. And I just, it's just so wonderful to see it and know you, and now let everyone else get to know you as well.
Thank you. Yes. No, I think it's interesting. I think my background, our background once upon a time was in theater, and I was and am an actor and a playwright. But as a writer, I do think that it's sort of been, there's been kind of this one story that has been informing me one way or another as a writer for almost as long as I can remember, and has shown up in different ways throughout my life. And it was this memoir that I published 2 years ago. In some ways, was sort of the most full, the most realized version of that story that I've been able to put out. And it felt like this enormous relief in a way. It was like, oh, I think I've finally done it. I think I've finally managed to put this down as fully as I can.
For people who don't know what in the hell we're talking about, would you so first, give us an idea of who you are outside of an actor, a playwright, a writer. Who are you? And what is this memoir that you have written? We'll just leave it at that.
I am Genevieve Kingston, but everybody calls me Gwen, so I hope everyone will. I live in Brooklyn, New York, with my husband Will. But once upon a time, I was a little girl growing up in Northern California, and one of the first things I knew in my conscious life was that my mom was sick and that she would not survive. So she was diagnosed with cancer when I was 3 years old. It's one of my first memories, is that sort of that knowledge. And that really informed my childhood. and I have an older brother. Both of us, we lived in this sort of shadow of knowing that time was short. Our time with our mother was short, and she, in this incredible way, chose to spend some of her time. She lived for a surprisingly long time. She passed when I was nearly 12. She spent some of that time putting together a box of gifts and letters for each of my birthdays until I turned 30. And for things like graduating high school and college and getting engaged and getting married and having a baby. So she managed to use the gift of that time to really prepare for my future, to dream into it, to imagine what I might need as a little girl growing up without a mother, and some of the conversations that I might hope to have with her when I was older. And through these incredible gifts, this incredible sort of act of courage, she was able to kind of keep parenting me all the way along as I grew up. And this box that I kept with me, in grad school. I had it with me in my little rented house. I sort of carted this thing along with me through dorm rooms and apartments so that every birthday it would be right there and I could open up that next installment of this story that she was telling me, which was about me, about her hopes and dreams for me, but also about her, because she would give me something, on my 16th birthday that would be something that she was given when she was 16. And she would say, here's what I was doing and thinking about when I was that age. And I wonder if you're going through something similar. So I lived this story for a long time. It was so sort of part of my bones. Um, and then, I made theater about it. And then I wrote an essay about it that I was able to place in the New York Times Modern Love column. And then I wrote a book about it. And the reason I knew the moment, and I kind of knew it was ripe for that retrospective, was I was 31 years old. So I'd opened all of those birthday presents, and what was left in the box was engagement, marriage, baby. And I was, like a lot of women around that age, sort of wondering, what is my relationship to those things, those sort of traditional female roles and choices? Are those things that I want for myself? If not, do I ever open them, and when? And those questions were kind of, I realized, the tip of an iceberg, which was me wondering, what kind of woman do I want to be? What kind of woman was my mother? And how am I living in relation to my perception of that? And so it felt like time to do a deep dive into her past and into this sort of narrative, this conversation she and I had been having for the 20 years since she passed away.
It's such an incredible story, and it's so, um for me, it just never stops being enraging and sad and inspirational and kind of this call to live and to I often feel like I am running up to like catch my life versus sitting in it and enjoying it. And for me, when my dad died, it was kind of like, well, not immediately, but certainly by the time I had met you, going to grad school was one of those things where it's like, okay, you have to like be courageous and do the thing, and you never know when that moment is coming when you've run out of time. And now I feel kind of like like I'm at that same point in a different way of you never know when you're going to have enough time. So just like stop and enjoy it. Stop looking for the next thing or the next whatever. Or, who cares that Zion is only eating animal crackers? Like this phase won't last forever. Like he's not malnourished. It'll be okay, right? Just take a deep breath and unclench your butthole and live life. Very Tom Jones, live life. And so I guess I'm wondering for you, has there been any call to action, or was the book the call to action? Like what now?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that that's what you're taking from it, which I love, because I actually think that what you're describing, that fierce kind of push toward action, achievement, and that race to keep up with yourself, I think that is actually a lot of what my mom dealt with her whole life, not just in that shortened time frame, but I think she was that kind of person as well. And so I actually think that those feelings that you're describing are actually part of what drove her to undertake this project. And I think that those were impulses that maybe did not always serve her well in her life. I think that in her reflections, it is something that she looked back on wondering, why was I always so hard on myself? Why did I always, why did I not sort of stop and enjoy? And at the same time, there's this duality where without that, without being that person, I don't know that she would have done this, that she would have been able to give me this gift. So there's no, easy, tidy answer here about how to live a life. And there's certainly no tidy answer here about how to approach your own death. Something that people ask me often is whether I would recommend that others undertake this. And I always have to say it's such a personal thing. I would never presume to tell another person how to die or how to prepare their family for something so impossible. This is just one story of one woman's way of trying to make peace with this unimaginable reality. So I think that all of that struggle and fire and discontent were very much there within her. I think that for me, I agree. I think she was giving me this gift of permission to live, to take pleasure in life, to be present with it, to maybe not be quite as hard on myself as she was on herself. And it's interesting that you bring up this thing about the book. I do feel like the book was, when I was in the midst of it, it very much took on this huge sort of cosmic weight of like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Is this like why I've become an artist, is to tell this one particular story? And I had the most bizarre experience. I have heard other writers talk about this, so I know I'm not unique, but when I was in the midst of writing this book, I felt a fear of my own death like I have never experienced before or since. I was like, could not, when I was on planes, I was always afraid they were going to crash. Cars, like I had this visceral fear that I was going to die before I finished it. And it sounds so arrogant in a way to think like that there would be this huge loss to the world if I didn't finish this project. But it was more that I felt so certain that I was working on the most important thing for me to be doing at that particular moment in time. And I thought, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be such a bummer if I didn't get to finish it? And then it's literally, I finished that final draft, that final major rewrite, and the publisher had accepted it. And it vanished. That fear. And now I just have a regular sized fear of death again.
Isn't far-fetched given the world that we live in today. Um, but that is really interesting. And I do think that there's some, everybody knows that I'm kind of like woo-woo, more spiritual than religious, even though I grew up not religious, but in church. And I do think that things like that, like the stories that we were meant to tell, or perhaps it's carrying on a legacy or breaking a generational curse, or however you want to look at what you're carrying forward, specifically from your lineage or from your parents. I do think that that's some of our most important work, whether we make it public or not, because I think that it then colors every interaction you have and the way that you are of service to the world, the way you're of service to something greater than yourself, which I think is the ultimate purpose. And I think why I'm so drawn to art is because once you put it out there, it really is for everyone to learn from and to connect to. And I think it creates more of what the world actually needs right now. Not to
Yeah.
sound too
No, I
sentimental,
hope
but
I hope so. And there is this incredibly powerful feeling when you feel that you've clicked into your purpose or something that you really are meant to do, and you're really in alignment with your values, with your artistic goals, with your your aspirations for yourself creatively. It's an incredibly powerful and exciting feeling. And I unfortunately, it's something that you don't get to just click into once and then you're in it and then you're on this track forever, right? And you have to so annoying. This thing with purpose, you have to keep finding them over and over again. So frustrating. Because yeah, it was such an incredible ride to be doing this. And it has, as you say, the great thing about a book is it really is forever. I mean, they can go in and out of print, they can all sorts of things can happen, but they're out there and people will always be able to find that. I'm in this really amazing process right now of it's continuing to come out in other languages. I can't believe it, but it's coming out in 16 languages total. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And we're sort of midway through that and seeing it come out all these different in different countries, different covers, different translations makes me really wish I spoke more languages. I ironically I studied linguistics in college. I was like a double major in theater and linguistics, and yet I don't actually speak any other languages fluently, and so I can't. I have to trust that these translators, know what they're doing. Of course, they do. They're artists themselves, but you have to give over control to know that and in some ways it's like the ultimate act of surrender to know it's a beautiful to me a beautiful metaphor of something I already know, which is that you can only control what you put out, but you can never control how it is received.
Girl,
Oh.
listen, this is as
Mm.
someone who literally hates being misunderstood also hates over explaining herself to not be misunderstood, that part, I feel that viscerally.
It's a real
He's
thing.
telling.
It takes so much softness and strength. It's so hard. It really is the ultimate sort of meditation in real time to sort of say, okay, I'm never going to be able to control that person's narrative of me. This is really on my mind right now because I'm headed into a situation in a week or so where I'm going to be seeing someone who I always struggle with. This person is my kryptonite in terms of how quickly I lose sight of the version of myself I want to show up as when in this person's presence, right? They do not bring out my best self. And I am headed into this trying so hard to keep my heart and my brain open, not to them because I don't it's not clearly this is not a person that I need a deep relationship with, but how can I cannot control how they're going to show. I'm never going to be able to explain to them why I'm right and they're wrong. Though of course I believe that I am and they are. Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
But I'm trying so hard to figure out what are the metrics I can use for myself, for how I can have an interaction that I come away feeling, if not proud of, at least decent about, that I feel like I showed up the way I wanted to. Because man, it's tough.
It is tough. I think people listening are going to resonate with that. I very much am a magnet for people, particularly women, millennials and Gen Xers who um who talk about that very thing. Particularly with family dynamics, I notice that um, I'm just drawn to people and people who are drawn to me who it seems like we have this sort of um, chosen family kind of like heavily boundaried s- uh, way of moving through the world. And I think that will really resonate because it is hard. And that makes me want to ask you then, what are your practices for staying grounded, for, dare I say, self-care, even though that's like an eye roll, but what are your ways to take care of yourself in big moments, but also just on the daily, you know?
Yeah, in this particular situation, which is a big moment, one thing is to not be around this person alone if you can help it. Grab yourself a buffer. Some I will, yeah. I still be in a group sort of public setting. So yeah, so I have at least one or two people who are read in on like this is it's going to be hard for me. Just stay close. Just someone else to be around, to be a witness, to be a distraction. So that's one thing. And then I was trying to figure out if this person. So this is someone from my past who I feel like there are two versions of me that show up when I'm with this person, and I don't really like either of them very much. One of them is an older version of me who is a resentful teenager, right? And she's kind of she's what is it? She uses language as a weapon. She tries to be she's sort of sassy and sullen and tries to be kind of use her words to punch back. And the other version is this hyper adult, very polished, kind of empty, vacant person who's just getting through and is just, she's Teflon, nothing sticks to her. She's just kind of cruising through. She's another defense mechanism, but she's not terribly interesting or authentic. And both of those people are rigid. They both have this rigidity and inflexibility to them. And I think the person that I try to show up as in the world is someone who is softer than that, who is porous and who can actually take in what's really happening instead of anticipating what will happen and then reading whatever actually happens through that lens, right? So if I expect that this will go badly, this person will behave badly, this person will say something infuriating, there's a good chance that I will experience it that way no matter what actually occurs, right? And so I won't be able to keep what actually happens in proportion for in the moment. So if I can show up as someone who is softer than that, who is actually able to relax enough to be present in the moment, who isn't buzzing with so much adrenaline that I can't take in what's happening, right? Then maybe it'll go fine. That doesn't mean that this person and our relationship has a future, right? It doesn't. They've proved enough times to me that that's not something that's right for us. But maybe this particular interaction will be fine.
It might, and also because what I'm hearing, if I put on my wellness hat, which, like, I never take off, let's be honest, but I'm hearing mindset work in there. I'm also hearing mind-body connection in there, like, sort of what you believe is what will be. And kind of also there's 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 something to be said about being like Teflon. There's something to be said
Oh, yeah.
about using words to punch if, like, that is where you find power. I think there is something in our defense mechanisms. Like, I'm so interested in, if you wanna know where I nerd out,
Please.
I'm interested in how we survive. I'm interested in the intelligence of, right, the body and the brain, how our body knows what's happening before we catch up to it or before we can put language to it, of how beautifully all of these systems work to keep us safe. So it's almost like you can delve into those versions of yourself that you don't particularly love before you even know you're delving into those versions, right? Because the body is like, we got to protect Gwen, and this is how we're going to do it. And then Gwen comes online. And
And those versions have protected me before, right? And that's it's worth saying that it's worth saying. I don't mean to be ungrateful to either of them actually. And I
yeah,
don't mean to say that they are bad or wrong or that those might not be. This is a long-standing dynamic. And so I've been through, iterations of this
yeah,
and I've sort of at first I was the resentful teenager and then I became the sort of overly glossy, untouchable adult and now I'd like to see if maybe I don't need those anymore. But that's not to say that those aren't appropriate especially when there's a real power imbalance. And in this case, that's what I'm trying to unlearn. I was talking to my therapist about this the other day, and I was trying to figure out, I was like, what? She was like, what's a mantra you could use that might help you in the moment? And I was thinking about it. I was like, I think it sounds so dramatic, like melodramatic and like overly literary, but it's like, you have no power over me because they actually don't anymore, but they used to, right? They used to have power. And that's why I showed up in those ways. But now they really don't, they really can't harm me. And so maybe I can shed those protective layers.
maybe you can. I think it's incredible self-awareness either way. And I believe I'm also, in this work. So I'm not talking to you as someone who's like, well, here's what you do. But I believe that the power comes in being able to choose, right? Being able to choose the strategy that you need for the situation and not walking away feeling like, well, that just totally got away from me. Or, you just kind of got swept up in the moment without being able to respond. That what we talk about in yoga, that responding versus reacting, right? To me, that's what it sounds like. You want to respond as Gwen. and not react as maybe whatever you were in the
I
past.
do.
I
And
think that's
maybe I will fail and maybe I will react and maybe it will get away from me and I'll forgive myself and we'll try again later.
well, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine, whatever it is. Just don't get arrested,
Yeah.
and really that like nothing could
Watch this
like
space for updates on Gwen's,
I know.
meeting bail. I'll do a GoFundMe some to post my
We'll
bail.
put it on Instagram.
Great.
Like we'll have like, webcams of you like knocking someone out.
Cool, cool.
Um so yeah, okay. So you have these strategies for like this moment, this like self-awareness, and then, you know, you've clearly gone through a lot of pain and grief and processing and joy and all these things, right? So let's just say now that you are a fully formed grown up outside of school, as you move about the world, how do you approach caring for yourself? What does that look like in terms of movement or nutrition or however you want to approach it? I think that um, people are always looking for honest reflections on how to approach health and wellness from different perspectives. And so hopefully you don't do nothing because I think I will shrivel and die, but give us what you got. Give us the strategies.
Absolutely. No, no, no. Don't worry. I won't totally let you down. I will say that it's something I continue to grapple with, especially nutrition. I'm married to someone who takes fitness and nutrition very, very seriously. And who nerds out about it, not quite as much as you do, but I mean, he's up there. And so he is eternally frustrated by my disorganized eating habits because I am the kind of person who forgets to eat for long periods of time and then panics and eats whatever is nearby. I know it's terrible. I am working on it. He's helping me. He's helping me. But I have found a workout practice that makes me very, very happy. I used to be, I was a yoga instructor for years, which I absolutely loved the physical practice of. I found the studio world to be quite complicated. There are some scary things if you want to look behind the curtains of how some of these places are run, but not all of them. So I no longer do that, but I love my yoga practice. Ideally, that's twice a week, and then 3 days a week. This will make you very happy. I lift. I lift.
You know,
I
thank you, Giza.
do. I lift with an amazing woman who does. She owns our local gym, and she does these group practices that are wonderful because it's sort of a small group of like 4 to 5 women at a time, and it's enough that we're all at a similar place, so we can do a lot of the same things. But she, personalizes it for each of us, and she's so interested in lifting for women specifically, and how it's different than lifting for men. How we
Yes.
need different things, and she's just this incredible gift. She has on a internal level, I've never felt stronger, and on a vanity level, my butt has never looked better.
Love it. I literally said to my class this morning because we were doing something and like I was like my leg was like shaking and I'm like, you guys, having a nice, strong but juicy butt is life for me. So this is
And I've
like
never
we are
had a butt before. I've always had a flat, just sort of. I've never, and then
yeah.
here she is. She's arrived.
I am so happy for you. So I love this. I love this. So, okay, other things that are important to talk about. What about your sleep habits? Is your phone in the room with you? A TV? Like, give me that
So I've
piece of it.
always been able to sleep. Lucky me. I've never really had a
Yeah.
problem falling asleep. I do have the phone in the room with me because because I do. This is something I love. It's not for everyone, but I love. This has been a lifelong obsession of mine. Are audiobooks. Books on tape have been with me my whole life. It was how I went to sleep as a child when my parents could not read to me any longer, right? They would put a tape in and I find it so comforting. And I often will re-listen to the same books over and over and over again, the ones that I really love and that really put me in a relaxed space. And so I have the phone in the room with me because sometimes I will fall asleep listening to an audiobook, but it is always on do not disturb. I don't want to say I'm not addicted to my phone. That sounds like a bold claim in this day and age, but I am actually the person who forgets their phone in another room for many hours. And then people are mad at me because I wasn't reachable. By people, I mean my husband. We've had to figure that out. But, I'm actually the person who like, it doesn't, I there yeah, I really don't like being my attention being that up for grabs as it is when I'm on my phone because it's not even just the one thing you're looking at, right? Anything can flash up at any moment. I know there are these focus modes, but it just drives me nuts. And so I like to put it away. I wasn't on social media hardly at all before I had this book come out. And then I felt like I needed to in order to be reachable because people did me the honor of reaching out with beautiful, DMs about their own lived experiences and that felt like it deserved my attention. But I was very clear with my public I had the privilege of being very clear with my publisher that I was never going to be that my social media presence was not going to be a useful way to market this book because I'm not good at it. And if you don't come by it honestly, try like I think it doesn't the content isn't going to work if it's coming from a place of desperation of like I was supposed to do this, right? So I had to
Yeah.
be very upfront with them from the beginning. I was like, I'm not going to be useful to you in that way, but I am on it. If anyone needs to get in touch, if anyone, needs to talk about something, I'm here.
Yeah. Can you tell me what some of your favorite books to listen to are? I'm in 2 book clubs, one of them so I think people are gonna be like, "Why didn't Ashley ask what she's listening to?" They'll hate me. Please give us some
Oh my
titles.
gosh, I'm always so I listened to a lot of memoir when I was writing my memoir because I felt like it was worth getting really well versed in the genre, and it felt like paying respect to the genre that I was trying to contribute to really get a sense of the breadth of it. So, and one of the great things about memoir is that often it's read by the author, which adds a real layer to it. I think I had the privilege of recording my own memoir on audiobook, and it was such a joyful, incredible process. So some of the ones I love to listen to are this one is actually not read by the author, but it's read by one of my favorite voice actors in the world, Julia Whalen. The audiobook of Educated, the incredible memoir by Tara Westover, is spectacular. I Anne Patchett's memoir about her friendship with Lucy Greeley, who was also a memoirist. So Lucy Greeley's memoir is called Autobiography of a Face. It's stunning. Anne Patchett's memoir about her friendship with Lucy that she wrote after her death is called Truth and Beauty. I love listening to that one. Carmen Maria Machado's incredible memoir In the Dream House is more than a memoir. It's like memoir meets poetry. It's absolutely stunning, and she reads that gorgeously. So those are some of the ones that I really listen to over and over. Oh, and if you want fun one that is like exquisitely written, but is really just kind of juicy and a ride, that also read by Julia Whalen is Wild Game by Adrienne Broder is another just that one's just like you will draw you in, you will not be able to get off this train.
Those I
Yeah,
love those. Thank you. Thank you
absolutely.
for indulging. I think it's important, and I think it's important I'm noticing more, in my circles that people are escaping back into books, which I love, 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 because to your point, there's something about how we're spending our time and our attention and being immediately reachable. And also, I really, really, really want to hit on this fact that you don't know what could come up when you open your phone, especially social media. Anything from watching someone be murdered to a puppy to a whatever, like it's just very disorienting. And I love these moments when people share about the things that they are doing outside of their devices, especially reading or being out in nature, because I just think it's important to keep reminding people that we do not have to engage with the world solely through our phones. Like it's one tool that can be very, very useful. And also, it could be very, very detrimental if we're not just careful and mindful about what that time looks like.
Absolutely. And even my laptop, I mean, as a writer, obviously I have to be on it a lot, but I have been trying to take time, especially when I'm in the very early stages of a process, which I am now working on a new book. I'm trying like to actually be writing longhand and to take long walks with a voice recorder and to like that's something that I love. If you're, I mean, you as a podcaster know, it can be a really great way to get your thoughts out is to speak them
Yes.
aloud,
Yeah.
and they organize themselves in different ways when you speak them. Right? Oh my goodness, someone is ringing my bell. They're
It's
not going to
okay.
go
Do you need
away unless I fix it.
but we'll fix it.
I'm so sorry. Maybe we can go back and redo that. I'm just like, they're just going to keep ringing until I.
No, I think, like, I think that this is
This is life. This is interruptions.
right. These interruptions, this is like, I really hate, I'm using that word intentionally, especially for women, this sheen that you have to put on everything, this like it's all bullshit, right? It is I'm on my couch in my favorite joggers that are like falling apart in a sweater that I love that was probably $8. My makeup looks flawless, but like,
It
you know what I mean?
does.
Like
It does.
thank you. I'm just like, it's comfortable. We're at home. We're having a conversation and I think that that can just be okay, you know? I hope that someone delivered you something good though. I hope it's
It was actually flowers I saw through the.
yeah, well, that's lovely.
Yes, they're flowers from me to myself, which is something I do.
Oh,
Which is something I do.
okay, you did not mention this as your self-care strategy. Hold on. Hold on. Ma'am. Okay, so you send yourself flowers how often?
So I,
Like,
I I don't mean this to be a plug, but I do actually really love this company. It's called Botanical Brothers. They're based here in New York, and it's a subscription, and so it's a weekly subscription, but you just set how often you want it. So you can just be like, I want it like the first week of each month, or whatever it is. And I love it because they last longer than any other bouquets I've ever been sent. So I love them, and yeah, it just makes me happy. It just makes the house feel brighter.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's something my husband's gonna be like, "Great, you found another thing to spend a
I
monthly
know, I know. It's great. The
on."
subscription thing, it's
And
nuts. But they really do make it easy. Some of these things feel predatory where they make it actually really difficult to like opt out of things. This actually is very, very easy to curate. You can like look at the whole list of weeks and be like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, all at once. Anyway.
we love that. We love that. Okay, so I wanted to go back to the book for a moment, and something that really struck me was your mother's female friendships and how this group of women held your mother and then held you. And I don't want to give anything away because if people haven't read the book, they need to go buy the book,
Oh
read
yeah,
the
I should
book.
I should do it. It's called Did I Ever Tell You? Out in
Yes.
paperback.
I have a different cover. I have the
The
cover that's the
hardback.
picture of
Yeah.
you and your mom. And so a couple of things. Like one, what did you learn, especially from those moments after your mother's passing and how those women held you throughout your life as we learn in the book? But also too, loneliness is an epidemic in this country and people feel like they are more connected than ever, but also more lonely than ever. And they don't always know how to make friends, especially in adulthood when you're kind of not forced to be together all of the time. Um, so, how do you cultivate meaningful relationships? And were those women a part of that early scaffolding for you to allow you to now embrace, especially female friendships in adulthood?
Oh my gosh, I have so much to say on this topic. So please, I'm going to go. Please stop and redirect me wherever so starting with my mom's friends. Yes, absolutely. They were absolutely a model of friendship for me. So my mom had a group of friends who were, I think the first thing to say about them is they were really a different from one another. They had different backgrounds, different jobs, different. Some of them were stay-at-home moms. Some of them were, attorneys and um, business owners, and some of them were childless, and some of them were single, and some of them had children. And it was this really, some of them had four children. It was this real mix of women, and what kind of distinguished them as her core group of friends by the end of her life was that they were the people who chose to stay with her through this long, boring, painful illness. She was sick for about 9 years, and you'll lose people along the way. often, because a lot of people struggle to be, understandably, struggle to be around that kind of suffering and the kind of it's scary, it's scary to our own mortality to witness that. And so, but those aren't the people that you need around you during that time, right? It turns out. Um, so that's one thing, is that I saw that these were the people who were really supporting her through this impossible thing she was going through. My dad as well, absolutely, was incredibly supportive of her during this time. But her female friends were the ones who, took turns going to, we lived in California, flying to New York with her to see specialists, sleeping in hospitals with her, driving her around when she couldn't drive herself anymore. That was an incredible thing. And then they really did adopt, like I inherited them, if that makes any sense. Like when she passed away, it was like they like lifted me up into their circle. And because it was mutually beneficial. That's the thing. It wasn't taking pity on me. It was that I reminded them of her and they reminded me of her, and we could talk about her together. And it was this really, um, it was a really special relationship. So that's one thing. And they continue to be in my life, to this day. They have supported me in every imaginable way. And they will be with me when I'm dealing with this difficult person in a week or so. um, they'll have my back. So yeah, that has absolutely informed my ideas about what is possible when it comes to friendship. I, in turn, have a group of friends that are incredibly precious to me from my childhood. One of the reasons they're so precious is that they knew me. They knew my mom, some of them, and or they knew my dad. You and I lost our dads about at the same age. We were both 21 when we lost our dads, which was one of the ways that we, I think, kind of connected when we first met, was sharing that experience. So having friends who remember those people and remember you as a person with a dad or a person with a mom, is there's something special in that. We live all over the place and we are very different. And the way we keep our friendship intact is not everyone can do this. We're very lucky, but like we get together once a year. We rent a house together for like a weekend every year. And that's the one time that all six of us are together. We get together in twos and threes, depending on our geography, but that's the one time we're all together because it's magical when we're all together. So that's how we've figured out how to care for those friendships. And we have been doing that for 18 years, ever since we graduated high school. We've done it every single year, except for the pandemic when we did it virtually. And then in terms of like making new friends, which I feel like is such a topic of conversation now, how do we do it in this society? I am shameless about making friends. Like I will talk to anybody. Will is so embarrassed by it. Like I'm the person who will start a conversation with someone on the subway. I am someone who will, at the gym, like I will. And you have to be open to rejection. This is the important thing. You have to like take no for an answer, right? You have to read
Thank you for saying that.
the
Yes.
signs. You have to. But it's like, it's if someone's reading a book you love, maybe you say, oh my gosh, how are you enjoying that book? That's actually how I met my book club, in a bar. I These three women sat down. I was reading a book by myself in a bar. These three women sat down next to me. We're having this very interesting conversation. I could tell they were smart and funny and amazing. All I wanted was to join them. And then one of them turned to me and said, "Oh, how are you liking that book? It's one of my favorites." And I was like, "I'm in." And I and I was like, "Can I join you?" And they were like, "Okay." And then we formed a book club that very night, and we've been going for like 7 years. Yeah.
Stop.
So
Wow.
yeah. So
Okay, so you have to be brave.
you
You
have
have
to
to
be
be brave.
brave and you have to take no for an answer.
Got it. Okay.
Those are
What
the two.
else? What else? Yes.
I have a really good one. Um, if you if you find somewhere that has pub trivia,
Okay.
and then you go by yourself, this is the tricky bit. This is where it's scary. You have to go by yourself. If you're in a pair, it won't work. You go by yourself and you offer to join someone's team because
Wow.
they and you say, here's what I'm good at. I know these kinds of things and these kinds of things. Here's how I can be an asset to the team, whatever that may be. This has
Gosh.
always worked for me. One time I couldn't believe it. I got turned down and then immediately and I was like, okay. Like they were like, actually, we're not sure if we're staying. I don't know. And I was like, okay. I was like, wow, that always works. And then, someone from across the room was like, "Did you say that you wanted to join a team? Come over here." Like, redirect. You have to be brave, but people saying no isn't the worst thing that can happen.
Even as you're like go to go to pub trivia by yourself. I'm like, okay, I'm out.
I know, I know, I know, I know. But maybe
No,
someone listening will be in.
yes, yes. Like we are all different. We all have our strengths, and I think that that's the piece that people need to hear, which is that you have to put some skin in the game. You have to put yourself out there. I think that, it's and I am notoriously annoyed when people talk to me. And like the first few seconds, I'm just like, "What? What are you like I'm like, leave me alone. Someone is always talking to me. Let me be in my own thoughts for 5 seconds." And then after those first few seconds, I'm like, "Asshole, like, can you just be a human with another human for a moment?" And then it ends up being fine. But
Maybe, or maybe that wasn't the day to speak to you. And
or maybe it
maybe,
wasn't,
you know.
like, I mean, I could also, like, go my whole life without it being the right day to speak to me, but, like, I think I'm always doing this dance as a mother, as a, person who has a very, like, client-oriented job. It feels like I'm always in service of someone else's thoughts or their body or their, um whatever their I don't wanna use the word issue because I don't wanna sort of, like, undermine the gravity of some of the things that are shared with me, but, like, whatever sort of thing that they're perhaps working through that sometimes, like, I forget that I also need the community because I am usually someone else's community, right? So then I have to remind myself of that I deserve what I give also, that I don't always have to be the giver or the organizer or the person who has the expertise in a particular area that I can turn to the person in line at the grocery store and say something and that's normal.
Yeah. And maybe that's the end of the interaction, but sometimes that's lovely just to have someone, say, "Oh my god, this line," right? And you're like, "I know." And then,
Exactly.
you've made a connection and you've reminded yourself that you're in community, because more and more, of course, I'm so grateful for the ways that we can be connected with people who are far away from us, but communities, our sense of what community means, I think is becoming less and less geographic in a way that's not always helpful, right?
Yeah,
We have these online communities, we have these communities of like-minded people that are wonderful and supportive, but it means that we're not if it's not about geography, if it's not about these sort of other things, then it means that we get to self-select our communities to a fault, right? Where we don't have to be in community with people who are very different from us. And I think that that is there's a point at which that stops, uses it, loses its utility. There's a huge amount of safety and support and wonderful things in that, but I think that it bottoms out at a certain point when we self-select down where there's no friction and we don't have to learn how to deal with friction. It's too easy to say, okay, we're not, like, it's too easy to write people off and say there's friction, we're just not even going to try.
that's such a great point. In uh, Jen's book club that you were a part of this past Monday, we had our second author. You were the first. We had our
Yay!
second author join book club. McElwain, I think it's how you pronounce her last name. She wrote this gorgeous collection of short stories called Seidel Creek. It's set in Western Pennsylvania where she grew up.
I
And
love that you're reading short stories with your book club.
I
Yay.
you know what? So do I. So do I. And what's so interesting is Jen even said, that we don't often read short stories. And she brought up you and she's like, we don't often read memoirs, but like certain books or certain connections or whatever are just kind of worth making everyone buy. And this was this was certainly one of them. And some of the stories are so human and real that they are just incredibly heartbreaking. This is like a very rural area, very working class. And what was striking to me about what she said was that when you live in a community like that, you don't have the luxury of saying, well, this person's a Trump supporter. I'm not going to speak to them. Or this person, like, you're all each other has. And she's like, there might be one plumber in the whole town, and you don't worry about what their politics are because you need help. And it really, I know this intellectually, and this is a part of my work, and still I was like, you're right. You can't just immediately write people off because of some difference that you've deemed as a non-negotiable. And certain things really are,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, you know if someone is riding around in a, white hood on their head, like, I'm probably not going to be like, hey, do you want to join my book club? But most situations are not that extreme where my physical or psychological safety is so threatened where I cannot find some connection point or be in community in some way with people, you know?
Yeah, this is something I think all of a lot of us have been thinking a lot about is how do we do this? And something because I'm a writer and a linguist, at least it's interesting to me. I think me I was talking about with our mutual Octavia Richmond the other day that language is so powerful and so, I think that something that often happens when we think that we're trying to engage with another person who has different ideas than us and talk about difficult topics, which maybe we don't even need to do. Maybe it's just we use the plumber and we just talk about the weather and that's fine, right? We don't need to talk about difficult things. But if we are trying to talk about the things that we think we feel so differently about, the things that we're like, well, you must believe this and I believe this, and therefore there's no future for our relationship. I think something that happens, especially to those of us who try to keep ourselves informed, is that we find ourselves repeating talking points that we've heard from our media sources because they sound very compelling and well reasoned, which perhaps they are, but they contain these sort of buzzwords and phrases that have come to mean I am aligned with a team that is not your team, right? They have these extra layers of meaning that maybe we don't intend. We think we're just talking about the thing, but we're hitting these like talking points that the other person has been conditioned to hear as you're not on my team and I'm not on your team, right? And then they go into their talking points that let you know I'm not on your team and the conversation ends there. So if the question is, can you have a conversation where you somehow go down a level deeper and it's something along the lines of like, well, what are you afraid of? What's on your mind? What are you nervous about? What's important to you? What are your where you're actually talking about the thing behind the thing, which isn't like, what do you think the policy should be about X? It's like, what are you struggling with right now? What is your family struggling with? What are you afraid will happen if X happens, right? Can you go down a layer and talk about these human things? Because that's where I suspect that we're not as different as we think we are, but we have these elaborate narratives about how those fears translate into what should happen in the world that have gotten
Yes,
so,
for sure.
yeah.
And we mentioned surrender both before we started this podcast and earlier on in the conversation, and I always wonder what that how that comes into play as, you know, sometimes it's when we are afraid of what could happen or what is happening or how it affects our families, our health, whatever, we start to grip and we want to control. And when once you get to that point, you're kind of in fight or flight. This goes back to my my nerdiness about the body. And once you're in fight or flight, then all logic and reasoning shuts off, right? We have no more executive functioning. And so, how can we be in community with people who are different when we literally feel like we are fighting for our lives and their lack of understanding is just another data point of how we are unsafe in the
Right.
world?
Yeah.
And I think that happens on both sides, and there's an incredible dude. I haven't read his book yet. I just bought it because I just listened to him on a podcast. His name is Todd Rose, and he wrote a book called Collective Illusions. And I listened to him on Mel Robbins' podcast, and he talked about this how they did studies. He was the CEO of a think tank, and they did all of these studies that basically all said, we all kind of want the same things, like, we value the same things, we want the same things, but 2 things. 1, we go about it in different ways, and then 2, this is perhaps more interesting, we think that the other side, quote unquote "other side," um, wants something different. So, we're just kind of and then, of course, media just reinforces the loop that we're in, and it's so frustrating to be like, "Oh my god, are we in the fucking matrix? Like, how can we not pull ourselves out of this and kind of, come closer together? Like, how can you not talk to someone on the subway and be like, "Hey, how are you enjoying that book you're reading, right? We're just so inside ourselves sometimes.
I'm flashing to, being like, uh, I was I was like at an Airbnb in this like remote little town and got into some car trouble. My car was like basically kind of like in a ditch on a snowy road and getting pulled out of it by a kindly passerby, with a big truck with a big Trump sticker on it, right? And just
Yeah.
like it's a good reminder that like that person like I want to stop and pick their brain and have them explain to me exactly their thinking behind this, but they're no less likely to pull a stranger out of a ditch, um because of that. They're yeah. So I don't know, man. It's
Yeah, I know.
complicated.
It's so complicated. We make it more complicated. I have a couple of more questions for you
Thing.
if you're down, if you're
Please,
feeling it.
please.
Or your mom passed away when you were 11 or 12, and your dad passed away when you were 21. And so, for people who might look at you now in your 30s and think, oh, but she, like she's married and she has great friends and she, has written this book and she's all of these things. Isn't her pain behind her, right? What would you not necessarily what would you say to that, but how can you speak to the realities of your humanity, right? We see people in this light and we see their highlights and we see everything that goes really well without remembering that they're humans just like we're humans, and they hurt and they bleed and they go through things, and it's not always fun and accolades and success as we think about it. So that is my question. That's not really a question, but it's kind of a question that you can answer in whatever way makes sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, there are two things I need to say up top. One is to say that I came from like a fair amount of privilege, which is relevant in that um not everyone the story of losing both your parents before the age of 22 looks different if you have nothing to catch you in terms of a very close knit network of people to catch you, and also a financial safety net, meaning I wasn't immediately like, oh my God, how am I going to? Um, I was in college still when my father passed, and like I didn't have to worry about how I was going to pay to finish college or buy my books or eat. And I actually had a friend in college who was in that situation. She had lost both her parents, and she was there was like a fund at the university that was supporting her, but like, I mean, there was no net. And it was so stark to me, right? What that difference meant. Um, so that's one thing that I think is important because it meant that I had time to find my feet, if that made sense. I had this protective, bubble around me as I figured out what to do. I had struggled pretty severely with depression when I first went to college before my father's death. And that was a lot to do with this lifelong struggle I had had with homesickness. And that is a big part of my book, is that from the time I was a very little girl, I struggled with sort of debilitating homesickness, which was, I know, logically tied to the knowledge that my mother would die and the fear that it might happen while I was away, or that being away from the people that I loved most was not a safe thing to do because they might not be there when I came back. So I really struggled to transition to college. I finally did with the help of medication. I started on a low dosage of antidepressant, anti-anxieties that really, they didn't do all the work for me, but they really gave me that leg up that I needed to feel like I could make this really tough transition. And then just about when I'd gotten settled in that new life, my father passed very suddenly. And obviously this comes up in the book, but I share it. I'd like to share that he took his life only because I feel like it's important to keep normalizing that that's something that happens. And the more we don't talk about it, the more people think it's not. It's only happening in their family, right? Um, so in the aftermath of that, I was very surprised to discover that loss actually freed me from that lifelong homesickness and that lifelong anxiety about staying close to home. There's no earthly reason why that should have happened. It could just as easily have gone the other way. It could have reinforced my sense that it wasn't safe to stray, outside of my comfort zone. But instead, the way my brain took it in was that all of my fear about losing people who I loved by going out into the world and then losing people I loved, those fears had not protected me. And it happened anyway. So the fears were not useful. And so I gave them up. But that's just how it landed in my brain. I don't, I claim no credit for that. So I was in this situation actually of being, parentless at when I turned 22, but also feeling more emotionally free from my own fear and anxiety than I really ever had. I felt this sense of lightness that I never would have chosen. It doesn't mean that, this is not a trade that I would have chosen to make, but I felt this sense of being, freed from my own fear about what could happen if I took risks. I felt this freedom to take risks that I had never felt before. I felt the freedom to travel. I felt the freedom to apply to a graduate program across the country that would have been unthinkable to me before. I felt this permission to live my life outside and separate from uh, the fear of like keeping something or someone else safe. So it was this incredible period of independence for me. And as with all of these bursts of clarity, they kind of wear off, unfortunately, so you're not permanently freed from these concerns, but I am, I would say, a much less anxiously attached person to this day, than I was as a child growing up. I have much greater capacity to love without holding so tight that the other thing or person can't move. But it's hard won. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. And along those lines, how does that inform sort of, I know you're at the very beginning of your marriage journey, even though you and Will have known each other for a long time and been together for a long time. You could argue that it's no different, but I think it is. That's just me. So knowing sort of not just like what you've gone through, but also as you tell us in the book, you found out that your parents' marriage wasn't as perhaps joyful as you had assumed maybe growing up, even though it seemed very solid, right? It seemed like your household was definitely in service of making sure your mom was sort of like having the best experience she possibly could, that you guys were having the best experience you could. It sounded like you had a lot of beautiful family moments, from like the crafting that you would do to just like having like the other characters that would filter in and out of the story, of other family members and friends. And so I guess I'm curious as to what you will be carrying forward with Will, um, based on what you've experienced and what you then later learned from your mother's therapist, doctor.
Yeah. Part of this book is that I really did, my experience of learning about my mother, both through the letters that she left and through kind of going out beyond that, was really like a scavenger hunt. There were all these kind of clues she'd left behind for me to learn more about her as I got older if I wanted to. And one of the things was that I reached out to her therapist and said, "Gosh, I know that confidentiality is like a thing, but, and that death doesn't alter that. But is there anything you could tell me at all?" And she said, "Oh, your mom said if you called ever to tell you whatever you wanted to know," right? Which is you're like, "Oh my God, she's always 10 steps ahead of me," with anticipating what I might need or want. And yeah, what I understood from her therapist was that my parents' marriage and our family life really was this sort of, there was this dual sided thing. There was sort of a light side and a dark side, and the light side was that they were incredibly good, responsible, loving parents, and they really created with great intentionality and care and work this sort of charmed childhood for us with these big, elaborate birthday parties. And there was so much joy and playfulness and creativity in our home. And part of that was just who they were and what they were good at together. But part of it was this link, this fear that every birthday might be the last one that we had together, right? That every Christmas might be the last, that they needed to pack all of this joy and into our childhoods because we didn't know when childhood would sort of abruptly end. And and on that dark side, that their own connection was very strained, that they were sort of not very compatible people emotionally, but they chose to stay together, at least on paper, for us to keep our home as stable as they could. Again, because who knew how long that would last. So it certainly did inform my feelings and thoughts about relationships, and my it made me quite nervous about marriage and about what it could mean, and how it could look so idyllic on the surface and be so much darker and more complicated underneath. And uh, you're right. I think that making that commitment, as much as I wanted to say, Will and I were together for 10 years before we got married, and as much as I wanted to say, oh, there's no difference, I think for me that there has been. And this is so corny, but actually writing the book was what gave me the clarity and the courage to to do it. And it was so funny. So we got engaged. I was in the midst of finishing up my sort of first draft of the book when we got engaged. And I hid this from my editor for like 3 months because I knew that she was going to make me end the book with the engagement. And I was like, it's too corny. I can't do it. It's so stupid. And she was like, it's too much of a bow. And she was like, you know what, Gwen, sometimes life is corny and you just can't help, like sometimes, so yeah, but it was, I mean, it was like writing this down unlocked something in me. And it was something to do with the fact it was sort of laying out all of these reasons, these perfectly legitimate reasons why marriage seemed like a really fraught proposition to me, and looking at all of them and saying, ah, this makes perfect sense. Your feelings are totally valid and they don't have to inform the future necessarily, right? You don't have to carry that forward. And the other thing that I realized as I was laying all of my mother's letters out kind of together and looking at the whole shape of what she had prepared for me as she was facing down the end of her life and trying to dream into mine, was that over and over again, she said, I hope that this experience of losing your mother so young won't prevent you from being able to love and to receive love. I hope that that's not what happens because of my death. I hope that you stay open to love and to the world. And that what I didn't realize how kind of constant that message was until I looked at them all together and saw like that was her big wish for us, was that we wouldn't be so afraid to love, based on that loss. Um, So yeah, I think that, Will and I are have headed into this with eyes wide open. We've known each other for a long time, and we know we have no illusions, I think, about how challenging this kind of commitment can be to sustain. But we are, I think we wrote our own vows, and the one that I felt really important for me to say was I promise to love you with an undefended heart, meaning, whatever little bit of you there is left that kind of has to have a narrative of like, if this ends, I'll still be okay, and here's how. Right? You sort of have to let that go and say, I won't be okay. That doesn't mean I won't survive. That doesn't mean that we don't deal with that later, but I'm not keeping any of myself back. I don't have an escape bag packed in my heart. you know?
What do you do when you are afraid? How do you work courage into your life?
Oh, what a beautiful question. On bad days, I drink alcohol, and which I don't
Yeah.
recommend.
Yeah.
But I still do it sometimes. And on good days, I write, and I really do talk to my mom. I have a little tradition that I do um every year on with my parents on their birthdays and on the anniversary of their deaths, where I write them. I write a letter and then I set it on fire, and that feels very good to me. To kind of feels like a way of helps me clarify what I want to say to them. But I've never been a religious person, but the kind of the spiritual upbringing that I received, which was kind of piecemeal, but one of the pieces of it that felt really good to me that I've held on to is the idea that your most direct source of connection to something bigger than yourself is through your ancestors, even those maybe you have never met, but that they are tied to you in some way that gives you special, kind of access to them, at least even more strongly than to the sort of universe at large. And so those, I will say that that's who I go to, where I go, um, for comfort on that deepest level. Um, but I also am lucky enough to have a whole list of people that I can call and say I'm just feeling really scared and sad right now. Mostly they're my mom's friends, those same women, that step in and say, yeah, sounds right. I'm sorry. you know,
Well,
can't fix it, but why don't we just be sad and scared together?
right. Thank you for also just acknowledging that, um, you said on bad days and you said on good
Yeah.
days, because it's not something that it's not something that you can always pinpoint, and it's also just it's not I think needing courage is something that happens maybe more often than we recognize or realize, or there's always a way to step further into being the most embodied version of yourself. Courage isn't always about success or accomplishment, it's also just being more of who you really are,
Oh,
you know?
and it's oh man, yes, absolutely. And it's I certainly don't pretend to have things figured out. It is amazing how much we have to keep, or I have to keep learning the same things over and over again.
Mhm. Hello.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh. Like I thought we'd sorted this one out.
Mhm.
For example, like something that I was realizing for like the thousandth time yesterday is that I'm always so afraid of the distance between bad writing and good writing. Like it's so upsetting to confront your own bad writing. Um, but the distance between bad writing and writing is so much smaller than the distance between any writing at all and not writing at all. Like that's actually
Yeah.
the biggest distance. It seems in my head, I keep forgetting, I keep thinking that it's so easy to sit down and write, but it's going to be bad. It's like, no, it's so hard to sit down and write. And it might be bad, but it's actually that bad writing is like a breath away, a few days, a little work away from being good writing. Like it's the distance is in sitting down. And I have to keep learning this over and over and over because it's so hard to sit down. I tell myself I make up all these narratives to avoid it, just sitting down and beginning, or just sitting down and continuing. And it's the biggest hurdle every time, every morning. That's the biggest thing is did you sit down and open the document and spend time there? Even if you didn't write a word, even if you stared out the window the whole time, but you were in the document and in the thought and in the narrative, you know. And if I didn't sit down, then that feels like a day where it's like, oh, missed it. And if I did, then I end the day feeling better.
I think that's it's a perfect it's the perfect way to end, but also it's just the perfect little bit of just fucking show up.
Just show up.
Just show up. I am so guilty of just like wanting to see the end, wanting to know that it's going to be good, wanting to know that even if I'm like, if I don't want to get off the couch to go lift weights, I'm just like, why do you need to know that this workout is going to be good? Why do you need to know, I'm going to burn XYZ calories, or I'm going to get this gain, or it's just like, just fucking get up and change your clothes. Just like, this is why this podcast is called Further Forward. It's literally just one step at a time. You don't need to see the end. Just go do the thing and see what happens by you just doing the thing. That is always my lesson. It's like banging my head against the wall.
Just show up. I know. Just sit in the chair. For me, it's just sit in the chair. Just put your butt in the seat at your desk and see what happens. And I'm always
Yes.
surprised whenever I actually do that. I'm always surprised at what shows up. It's never what I think will or what I could have predicted. And every day, I mean, I try not to catastrophize about it, but it's so clear that it's like, oh, I wrote this way because it was today. And if I'd shown up a different day, it would have shown up differently, right? So like every day has its own opportunity, and I'm just trying to catch as many of them as I can.
You for that. Thank you. Is there anything that you want to share with people in terms of what you're working on or what they should be on the lookout for or how to purchase this book or where to find you. Do all of your plugs and everything that matters to you right now that you want people to engage with.
Please absolutely find me if you want to with folks. You can find me at Genevieve _Kingston on Instagram. You can my website is genevievekingston.com. If you're interested in looking up the New York Times essay, it's called "She Put Her Unspent Love in a Cardboard Box." The book is called "Did I Ever Tell You?" And you can get it wherever you buy books. What I'm working on now, in such early stages. I'm trying to write another book. It's in such early stages that I won't go into it in any detail, but I do want to just speak out the theme that I'm interested in, that I'm exploring right now, because it feels on topic, and it's something I'm just actually, this is an invitation. Get in touch with me if this theme resonates with you, and if you have stories or narratives or things that it makes you think of, because I'm still collecting. I am Ashley. We're around the same age, and I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but as a woman at this age, I am having this feeling of all of the things that I have chosen to um, invest my time in or prioritize, and like how they're going. Is that partnership? Is that children? Is that career? Is that a combination? Is that friendship? The kind of the things that I've been investing in, I'm feeling them kind of we're not investing in. I'm feeling them kind of curdle around me and solidify, not in a way that feels like entirely from myself, but in the way I am received by the world. That I going from like, what are your hopes and dreams and aspirations to like, oh, you're this kind of woman. You are, partnered, unpartnered, children, no children, childless by choice, childless not by choice. You are at this point in your career and kind of like, this is what you are now. And what I feel that doing is creating these sort of almost without any of us meaning to participate. It creates these divisions between women and what they are, right? And makes it very tempting to retreat or shelter, is maybe a gentler word, into a group of people whose lives look like our lives because they get it, and their life choices validate our life choices, right? And there's a real sense of kind of, yeah, retreating into these little bubbles. And I'm watching among my broader friend group some friendships, that long lasting friendships really struggle and strain against those divides, struggling to understand each other, um, struggling because they feel like society values them differently based on those choices, right? And it's tough. And so my sort of what I'm interested in and what my book is interested in is like, how do we hold on to each other across those divides, across those narratives, across that messaging? Because my hypothesis is that in around 10 to 15 years, we're going to we're all going to be kind of 45, 50, somewhere in there. And we're all going to feel like those divides, these are not as huge as they feel right now. We're going to discover that we really do have a lot in common, but we could lose each other along the way if we're not really intentional. So I'm really interested, how do we hold tight to each other and show up with curiosity and openness and try to understand each other's lives during this like tumultuous, shuffling, if that makes any sense. So that's what I'm fascinated about. If folks have
That's
stories about friendships that they've had that have really struggled, or, it's drained across those kinds of divides, or ways that you have found to overcome that, or practices you have to stay close with, to maintain friendships, I would love to hear. I would love to hear from listeners.
That really resonates. I mean, definitely, I'm down to talk. I will tell you. I mean, even one of my very best friends in the world, Zion's godmother,
Mm.
just had her 60th birthday,
Mm.
has three grown up children. And, I think so many of my friendships are intentionally that way. And it helps me to pull my head out of my own ass, to be honest with you. I can get really caught up in the idea of, well, I have a toddler and you just don't get it because you're not busy in the same way that I'm busy and you didn't breastfeed. So you don't know what it feels like to be like chained to your cat. Like I could 100% go there. And somehow I've just been really lucky to have all of these friendships of people who have children and don't, and who are different ages and body types and races and just like completely different identity markers, that sometimes we'll sit at dinner and it will be forever until someone's like, "Oh, how's your husband and your son?" And it's like, "Yeah. Oh," that it's not the thing that I lead with, but it's a part of me, not my whole identity. But I don't know if it's like I I don't know if it's because a lot of these friendships I had before I had Zion,
Mm.
so we stayed in our rhythm of being whole people, or like, I or if it's like because I had Zion, I'm even more conscious of like being a I don't know. I don't know. But I'm interested in
I
in
think it's a testament to what I keep coming back to is it's about imagination, and because I love words, the one of the things that I'm trying to shift in my own language, which is it's small, but I think it for me it opens up a lot, is the difference between when someone's going through something that you haven't experienced, saying, "Oh, I can't imagine what that's like," feels like such an abandonment, right? I can't imagine. It cuts you off from them, right? And it's like, oh, well, I guess you
yeah.
could try. And
Yeah.
shifting that language to I can only imagine, right? Like, and I know this is an original thought, but I'm really into it right now. Like being like, right, like I am
Makes a
actively
difference.
trying to imagine your feelings and your experience. And I'm interested in trying to imagine what your life is like. I think it goes a long way.
This is literally exactly what we were just talking about. Not just talking about, it was probably an hour ago at this point, but like when we're talking about building community
Hmm.
with people who are different, this is
Right.
just another extension of that, right?
Yes.
And I'm so interested to see what comes of what you're building, because this is a really timely conversation, because we need to build these bridges. Like we need to figure out how to stay connected to each other and our own lived experience. It's all valid, and somebody else making a different set of choices or living in a different set of circumstances doesn't invalidate yours or doesn't make yours wrong or whatever. I'm just super interested in this.
Yeah. Imagination.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. Well, people, she told you where to find her. She told you where to purchase the book. I really, really hope that you if you have not read it, I know some of the people listening have read it. If you have not read it, I hope that you choose to do that. If funds are tight, which we understand, then you go and you support your local library because they
Absolutely.
need that support as well. If you are in a position where you have the book and would love to lend it to people or put it in your lending library in your neighborhood, like continue to I'm not giving up my copy because it has highlights and stuff, but for all of you, like lend your book out, right? Continue. It's just another way that you can take care of someone because we all have different resources, but just make sure people find some way to hear these words because they're important. And Gwen, you're doing such important work in the world through your art. And I just appreciate you immensely for coming on this podcast and being human with me.
Thank you, my friend. I am so excited to keep listening to this podcast and see where it goes. I think this is such a wonderful undertaking, another wonderful chapter in what you're offering. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye, everybody.